For 20 years, I believed my husband got up in the middle of the night to pray. The truth behind those midnight whispers would destroy everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eleanor Thompson. I'm 73 years old, and today I'm going to share a story I've kept in my heart for a very long time. But before I begin, I'd like to ask you watching to please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This helps me continue sharing my stories with all of you. It was 1968 when I met Arnold. I was only 18 and working at my father's stationery store in Mill Creek, a small town in Pennsylvania so tiny that everybody knew everybody. Back then, things were very different from today. There wasn't this constant rushing around. Life moved at a slower, more peaceful pace. I remember like it was yesterday when Arnold walked into the store for the first time. Tall, well-groomed hair, impeccable suit. He worked at the town's bank, the only one that existed there at that time. A young man who worked at a bank was considered quite a catch, you know? Young women would sigh when he passed by, but it was to me that he smiled that afternoon. "I need some notebooks for work," he said. Shy as I was, I could barely look him in the eyes while I wrapped the notebooks in brown paper. The next day he returned, and the day after that, and the day after that, always with some excuse to buy something, until he finally invited me for ice cream after Sunday church. My father, a strict and traditional man, only allowed it because Arnold's family was well respected in town. His father was a pharmacist, his mother a teacher. Good people, as they used to say back then. Our courtship was like a dream. He'd bring me wildflowers he picked on the way to my house. We wrote letters to each other, even though we lived only a few blocks apart. That's how things were back then. Everything had its time, its charm. There was no kissing in public like I see nowadays. We dated on my parents' porch, always with my younger sister watching us, as was proper. After a year like this, Arnold spoke with my father. He asked for my hand in marriage, all done properly. We were married at St. Anthony's Church. My dress? Oh, my dress was a dream. My mother and aunts spent months sewing it. It had real lace on the hem that my grandmother had kept in a chest since her youth in Ireland. The reception was in the church hall, with a 3-tiered cake and all the trimmings. It was the town's event of the year. We were young, in love, and full of dreams. When I moved into Arnold's house, a simple home he bought with his father's help in the new neighborhood, I felt my adult life had finally begun. During those first weeks, I felt lost, not really knowing what to do. I had never managed a house by myself. My mother would visit me almost every day to teach me how to do laundry, how to cook beans to the perfect consistency, how to clean the wooden floors. Arnold was a good man. He left early for work, returned in the late afternoon, always at the same time. He was religious, you know? We went to church every Sunday. He participated in the St. Vincent de Paul Society meetings, which helped those in need. Everyone in town admired him. "How lucky you are, Eleanor," other women would tell me when we met at the farmer's market or church. And I agreed. I truly thought I had been blessed. In those first years, everything was happiness. Soon came our first child, Michael. 3 years later, Claire was born. Our family was complete. Arnold was a present father for that era. He would play with the children when he came home from work. He would tell stories before bedtime. In the photos from those years, we are the picture of the perfect family. Him in a suit, me in a floral dress, the children dressed like little dolls. We were what everyone wanted to be. But you know, my dears, behind every closed door, there's a story that doesn't always appear in photographs. It was like that with us too. Not that Arnold was a bad husband, no. He never raised a hand to me or the children. He never came home drunk, worked hard, and brought home his full salary. By the standards of that time, I had nothing to complain about, but there was something that began to catch my attention in the first year of marriage. Arnold had a peculiar habit. Almost every night, around 2 or 3 in the morning, he would get out of bed. At first, I thought he was just going to the bathroom, you know? But I noticed he would take a half hour, sometimes a full hour, and when he thought I was sleeping, he would quietly leave the bedroom. One night, curious, I waited for him to leave and got up too. I followed his footsteps down the dark hallway of our house, and there he was, kneeling on the living room carpet, facing the window that overlooked the backyard. Eyes closed, hands clasped in prayer, whispering words I couldn't quite understand. Just low murmurs, as if he was talking to someone in secret. I went back to bed before he saw me. The next morning during breakfast, I asked him about it. "Arnold, I saw you praying in the middle of the night. Is everything okay?" He looked a bit embarrassed, but smiled. "Eleanor, since I was a boy, I've had this habit. I wake up in the middle of the night and take advantage of the silence to talk with God. That's when I feel closest to Him, you know? When the whole world is asleep and it's just Him and me." I found it beautiful. I was even moved by my husband's devotion. What a man of faith I had by my side, I thought. Someone who got up in the middle of the night to pray for his family. I told this to my mother, to my friends, always with pride. "Arnold is so devout that he wakes up in the middle of the night to pray," I would say. And everyone agreed that I was a fortunate woman. And so the years went by. Our children grew up. Michael, studious like his father, soon stood out in school. Claire, my little princess, was Arnold's favorite. On Sundays, we all went to church. Afterward, we would have lunch at my mother-in-law's house, stroll in the town square. A simple life, but one that seemed complete. And every night, the same ritual. Arnold, getting up in the middle of the night for his prayers. I hardly paid attention anymore. It had become part of our routine. Sometimes, half asleep, I would hear those whispers coming from the living room. Incomprehensible words, but which I imagined were prayers for the children, for me, for our family. When we completed 15 years of marriage in 1983, Arnold was promoted to branch manager. It was a big event. We had a small party to celebrate. Our financial situation improved. We were able to change the living room furniture, buy a new television, color, one of the first in town. The children were already teenagers. Michael was 14, Claire was 11. Life was going well. It was around this time that Arnold began to travel more for work. Once a month, he would go to Philadelphia for meetings at the bank's headquarters. He always came back with little gifts for me and the children. A scarf for me, a toy car for Michael, a doll for Claire. I thought it was so thoughtful. It was also during this time that the midnight prayers became more frequent. It wasn't just once or twice a week anymore. It was almost every day, especially before and after his trips to Philadelphia. And I, foolish as I was, felt even more blessed to have a husband so devoted to faith. How God must love Arnold, I thought, who sacrifices his sleep to talk with him. In 1985, when Michael turned 16, he began talking about going to college. He wanted to be an engineer. He was a studious boy, got the best grades. I started to worry about the future. College was expensive. We needed to save. That's when I decided to look for a job. I didn't want anything that would prevent me from taking care of the house and family, but I wanted to help with the expenses that were only increasing. A friend who worked in the secretary's office at the local school told me they needed someone for a part-time position. I went to talk to Arnold about this. He didn't like the idea at first. "A woman's place is in the home, Eleanor," he said. "What will others think? That I can't support my family?" But I insisted, showed him that I could take care of the house and work outside, that the money would be for Michael's college, for our children's future. He eventually gave in. And so I began working part-time in the school office. I liked it more than I expected. It was good to talk with other people, to feel that I was contributing. The children were growing up. They didn't need my constant attention anymore. Michael was even dating a girl from church. Everything seemed to be on track. In 1988, when we had been married for 20 years, I began suffering from terrible headaches, migraines that would leave me bedridden for days. The town doctor prescribed medications that did little good, until a colleague from school recommended a neurologist in Philadelphia. Arnold took me on one of his work trips. After several tests, the doctor said there was nothing serious. It was probably stress, but he noticed that I had difficulty hearing when he spoke more quietly. He suggested I see an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and that's how, because of the headaches, I discovered I had premature hearing loss. The doctor prescribed a hearing aid. Me with a hearing aid, I thought, alarmed. It seemed like something for old people. I was only 42. But the doctor explained that many people experience hearing loss early and that there was nothing abnormal about it, that I would hear much better with the aid. Arnold, always practical, took care of everything. In 2 weeks, I already had my hearing aid. At first, it was strange to use that thing. It seemed like all the sounds in the world were amplified. The ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall, which I barely noticed before, now sounded like a hammer pounding. The bird song in the yard was almost deafening. The noise of pots in the kitchen, the children talking, the television on. Everything seemed too loud. I had to get used to it gradually. During the day, I would take the device off now and then to rest my ears. And at night, when I went to bed, I always removed it and put it on the bedside table. After all, what would I need it for while I slept? At that time, in the middle of 1988, life followed its normal course. Michael, at 19, was studying for his college entrance exams. He wanted to get into Penn State. Claire, at 16, was beginning to dream of being a teacher like her paternal grandmother. Arnold continued at the bank with his monthly trips to Philadelphia, and I divided my time between the house and the job at the school office, an ordinary life like so many others. And every night without fail, the same ritual. Arnold getting up in the middle of the night for his prayers. I was so accustomed to it that I hardly noticed anymore. It was like the ticking of the living room clock. It was always there, but it no longer caught my attention. But fate, my dears, sometimes prepares twists that we could never imagine. And my twist began on a cold night in July 1988. A night that would forever change the course of my life, the way I saw my marriage, my husband, and even myself. That night, oh, that night is etched in my memory as if it were yesterday. It was when I discovered that things are not always what they seem, that sometimes we spend years believing in a truth that is, in reality, the most painful of lies. It was July 1988, a Tuesday. I remember it well because that day I had received Claire's report card. Excellent grades, as always. My daughter had taken after her brother in her love for studies. I made cornbread to celebrate, her favorite. We had dinner as a family, talked about the future, about Michael's plans for college. An ordinary night, like so many others in our lives. It was freezing cold in Mill Creek. The winter that year was particularly harsh. I put extra blankets on everyone's beds. Arnold and I retired around 10 o'clock as usual. I took off my hearing aid, placed it on the nightstand, and fell asleep quickly, tired after a long day. Around 2 a.m., I woke up with a terrible thirst. The dry winter air always left me with a parched throat during the night. I immediately noticed that Arnold wasn't in bed. Nothing unusual about that. He must have been in his nightly prayers, as always. I reached for the nightstand, picked up my hearing aid, and put it on. I didn't usually wear it during the night, but I thought I might need to call Arnold if I couldn't find him in the living room. I got up, put on my robe over my nightgown, and went out into the hallway toward the kitchen. Our house wasn't large, but that night the dark hallway seemed strangely long. The only light came from under the door of the study, not from the living room where Arnold normally said his prayers. I found that strange. In 20 years of marriage, his prayers had always taken place in the living room, kneeling on the carpet in front of the window. As I passed by the study, I heard his voice. Thanks to my hearing aid, I could clearly hear what had before been only indecipherable murmurs. But they weren't prayers I was hearing. It was a conversation in a low voice, whispered, but definitely a conversation. I stopped, making no noise. Something inside me, a premonition perhaps, made me stand there, listening. The door wasn't completely closed. Through the small crack, I saw Arnold sitting at the desk, his back to me. He was holding the phone to his ear, speaking so softly that without my hearing aid, I would never have heard. "Victoria, my love." His voice was soft, affectionate, a tone he hadn't used with me in years. "I miss you too. It seems like an eternity since last week." My heart stopped for a moment. Victoria? Who was Victoria? And why was my husband calling her my love? Yes. "Everything is already arranged for next week. I'll say I have another meeting at the bank, as always. I'll stay 2 days, not just one. I can hardly wait to see you, to hug you." I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. 20 years believing my husband got up in the middle of the night to pray. 20 years admiring his devotion, his faith. And now I discovered that those nightly prayers were, in fact, phone conversations with another woman. "The boy? How is he?" Arnold asked, still in that sweet tone. "Good that he did well on his math test. I'm proud of him. I bought that game he wanted. I'll bring it next week." "A boy? What boy?" Arnold was buying presents for another woman's son, using our money, the same money I was helping to save by working part-time, the money that should be for Michael's college. "I love you too, my darling. You're the only one who truly understands me, who knows who I really am. Good night. Dream of me. Boit." He hung up the phone and sat there for a moment in silence. I moved away from the door, my heart beating so hard I thought he might hear it. I went quietly back to the bedroom, removed my hearing aid with trembling hands, and lay down pretending to sleep. A few minutes later, Arnold returned to bed. I felt the mattress sink with his weight. He adjusted himself, sighed, and soon his breathing indicated he had fallen asleep. How could he sleep so peacefully? How could he lie down beside me after saying "I love you" to another woman? I spent the rest of the night awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of questions without answers. Who was Victoria? How long had this been going on? Who was this boy? And most importantly, what would I do now? When the sun began to rise, illuminating the bedroom through the slits in the curtain, I still hadn't slept a minute. I got up before Arnold, as always, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. I moved automatically, like a robot. Boil the water, make the coffee, cut the bread, fry the eggs. Gestures I had repeated thousands of times, but which that morning seemed strange, as if they belonged to another life, to another woman. Arnold got up at his usual time, came into the kitchen adjusting his tie, as he did every day, smiled at me, gave me a kiss on the cheek. A mechanical gesture without warmth. He sat at the table, picked up the newspaper, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't spent the night declaring love to another woman. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, without raising his eyes from the newspaper. I almost laughed at the irony. "Did you sleep well?" He really believed that I knew nothing, that I would continue being the naive wife for another 20 years? "Not really," I replied, trying to control the tremor in my voice. I had trouble sleeping. "It's the cold," he said, turning the page of the newspaper. "It's very cold this year." I served the coffee, put eggs on his plate, sat at the table across from him. I tried to eat, but each forkful felt like sand in my mouth. How to confront him, what to say, where to begin. Michael came into the kitchen, sleepy. Soon after, Claire. Breakfast continued as always, the children talking about school, Arnold giving advice, me serving more coffee, more bread. A scene of normality that now seemed grotesque, false to me. After breakfast, Arnold said goodbye as he did every day. Another mechanical kiss on my cheek, a quick hug for the children. He took his briefcase, put on his jacket. At the door, he turned to me. "I have a late meeting today. Don't wait up for dinner." How many times had he said these same words? How many late meetings had actually been meetings with her? With Victoria? "All right," I replied, my voice surprisingly firm. "Have a good day." As soon as he left, I felt a strange energy take hold of me. It wasn't just anger or sadness. It was a determination I had never felt before. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the extent of that betrayal. After the children left for school, I was alone in the house. Instead of going to my job at the school office, I called in sick. For the first time in my life, I lied deliberately, but I felt that I needed that day, that time, alone to investigate, to understand what was happening in my own life. I started with the study, the place where Arnold had made that call in the middle of the night. I opened drawers, went through papers. In more than 20 years of marriage, I had never invaded his privacy like this. I always believed that trust was the foundation of our relationship. How ironic to think of that now. In the third drawer of the desk, beneath a stack of bank documents, I found an envelope. Inside it were receipts. Rent in the name of Victoria Daniels at an address in Philadelphia. School payments for someone named Ryan Daniels. Purchases of clothes, toys, furniture. Everything dated from recent years, some as recent as the previous month. In the same drawer, hidden at the back, a small wooden box. Inside it, photos. My God, photos. Arnold smiling next to a younger woman than me, with dark hair and large eyes. Arnold hugging a boy of about 10, the three of them together, like a family, in front of a small house. On the back of one of the photos, a date, June 1987, just a year ago, and a message. Forever yours, Arnold. My hands were trembling so much that I dropped the photos on the floor. I had to sit down. The room seemed to spin around me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. But how to calm down after such a discovery? How to breathe normally when you realize that your entire life has been a lie? I continued my search. In the bedroom closet, in the inside pocket of an old suit that Arnold rarely wore, I found another envelope. Inside it were letters, love letters written by her, by Victoria. The most recent one was dated just 2 weeks ago. My beloved Arnold, the letter began. The days without you are increasingly difficult to bear. Ryan constantly asks when you will come to visit us again. He lights up so much when you're here. Sometimes I think about what our life would be like if we could be together permanently, if you didn't have to go back to your other life. But I know it's complicated. I know about your commitments. Even so, I dream of the day when we can be a real family, without secrets, without lies. Until then, I'll live for these precious moments we have together. With all my love, Victoria. Your other life. That's what I was to Arnold, to this woman. His other life. A commitment, an obligation from which he couldn't free himself. While I considered him the center of my world, to him I was just an obstacle. I sat on the bed, holding those letters, those concrete proofs of a betrayal that had lasted, I don't know how long. Years, certainly. Perhaps since the beginning of his trips to Philadelphia, perhaps since the beginning of the nightly prayers. The tears that I had managed to hold back until then finally came. I cried like I had never cried in my life. I cried for myself, for the naive woman who believed for so long in the lies of a man who didn't deserve her trust. I cried for my children who admired their father without knowing about the double life he led. I cried for the lost time, for the wasted years in a marriage that for me was real, but for him was just a facade. When the tears finally dried up, I looked at the clock. It was almost 5 in the afternoon. Soon, Michael and Claire would return from school, and later, Arnold would come back from his meeting. What would I do? Confront him in front of the children? Wait until we were alone? Pretend I knew nothing and continue living this lie? I put away the letters, the receipts, the photos, all the evidence in my dresser, under my clothes. I washed my face, tried to compose myself. I needed to think clearly, decide what my next step would be. That night, when Michael and Claire arrived, I acted as normally as possible. I prepared dinner, asked about their day at school, smiled when I should smile, spoke when I should speak. But inside, I was broken. Every gesture, every word seemed fake, as if I were acting in a poorly rehearsed play. Arnold called around 8 in the evening, saying that the meeting had been extended and that he wouldn't come home, that he would sleep at the bank with some colleagues, preparing an important presentation for the next day. Another lie. Now I knew. Now I understood. He wasn't at the bank. He was with her, with Victoria, with his real family, as she had written in the letter. "Is everything okay, Arnold?" I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Good luck with the presentation tomorrow." He seemed relieved by my understanding. Little did he know that the world we had built together was already crumbling, brick by brick. After dinner, when Michael and Claire went to their rooms, I stayed alone in the living room, sitting in the armchair, staring into space. The same carpet where Arnold supposedly knelt to pray every night. The same telephone he used to talk to her when he thought I was sleeping. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Arnold immediately. I needed more information. I needed to fully understand the situation before acting. I needed to prepare myself emotionally and practically for what would come next. Because one thing I knew for certain, nothing would be the same. The marriage I knew, the life I led, had ended on that cold July night when I put on my hearing aid and heard the truth behind my husband's nighttime whispers. In the days that followed my discovery, I lived a strange duality. On the outside, I continued being Eleanor, the dedicated wife, the loving mother, the responsible employee at the school office. I prepared meals, washed clothes, helped Michael with his college entrance studies, listened to Claire's dreams of becoming a teacher. I smiled when necessary, talked about trivialities, kept the house running. On the inside, I was another person, a wounded, betrayed, broken woman, but also a determined investigator resolved to discover the whole truth about her husband's double life. Arnold came home the next day as if he had really spent the night at the bank. He even brought some papers to prove the work he had done. More lies. I knew. But I said nothing. I just observed with new eyes this man I thought I knew so well. "The presentation was a success," he commented during dinner, smiling at the children. "The regional manager was impressed." How did he manage it? How could he lie so naturally, looking into his own children's eyes? It was as if I were observing a stranger wearing my husband's face. A week after that fateful night, Arnold announced during dinner, "I have a meeting in Philadelphia next week. I'll be there for 2 days." Michael and Claire just nodded, accustomed to their father's trips. I also nodded, pretending the same acceptance as always, but now I knew the true purpose of that trip. When we were alone in the bedroom, Arnold mentioned the trip again, perhaps feeling he needed to reinforce the lie. "It's an important meeting with the board. They're thinking of promoting me to regional." "That's great, Arnold," I responded, carefully folding the clothes I had just ironed. "You deserve it." He seemed satisfied with my response, with my apparent naivety. He lay down and was soon asleep, without any weight on his conscience. I, on the contrary, spent another sleepless night planning my next step. On the morning when Arnold left for his meeting in Philadelphia, I made a bold decision. As soon as he left, I went to the bus station and bought a ticket to the same destination. I had never done anything like this, traveling alone to another city without telling anyone, but something inside me had changed. Eleanor from before, obedient and predictable, was giving way to a woman who needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I left a note for the children, saying I needed to visit a sick aunt. Another lie in this web that Arnold had begun to weave so many years ago. I felt guilty for lying to Michael and Claire, but I told myself it was necessary, that one day they would understand. The bus journey took almost 5 hours. 5 hours looking out the window, watching the landscape change, reflecting on how my life had been turned upside down in just 2 weeks. I carried with me the address I had found on the rent receipts. Oak Street, 278, Forest Hills neighborhood. That's where I was going. I arrived in Philadelphia in the early afternoon. I had never been to the city alone. The few times I had visited were with Arnold, always staying in hotels downtown near the bank. The Forest Hills neighborhood was farther away. I took a taxi from the bus station, my heart beating so hard I thought the driver might hear it. "Oak Street, 278, please," I said, my voice trembling. During the journey, I looked out the taxi window with a mixture of fear and determination. The streets of Philadelphia, the buildings, the hurried people, everything seemed to belong to another world, a world very different from my quiet Mill Creek. A world where Arnold led a life completely different from the one he shared with me. When the taxi stopped in front of number 278, I felt my stomach sink. It was a small but nice house, a well-tended garden in front, colorful curtains in the windows, the kind of house where a happy family lives. I paid the taxi and stood on the sidewalk in front, not knowing exactly what to do. I had come this far, but hadn't planned the next step. Confront Victoria? Wait for Arnold? Just observe from a distance? The decision was made for me when the house door opened. A boy of about 11 ran out, a football in his hands. Right behind him, a woman appeared at the door. It was her, the woman from the photos. Victoria, younger than me, dark hair, pretty in a simple way. She wore a printed dress and smiled while watching the boy run to the street. "Ryan, don't go far," she shouted. "Your father will be here soon." His father? My God, the boy called Arnold father. The reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just an affair, a passing adventure. It was a whole family, a complete parallel life. I retreated a few steps, hiding behind a tree. I didn't want to be seen, not yet. I needed to process what I was seeing, what I was feeling. The anger, the pain, the shock, all mixed in a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to knock me down. I stood there watching for almost an hour. I saw Ryan play with the ball in the small yard. I saw Victoria come out several times, checking if he was okay. She seemed like a good mother, attentive, caring. Under other circumstances, perhaps we could have been friends. What a strange thought. When a taxi stopped in front of the house, I felt my heart stop. Arnold got out, carrying a small suitcase and a wrapped present. He was wearing the same suit he had on when he left home that morning. The same man, but somehow different. His face lit up when Ryan ran toward him. "Dad! Dad!" shouted the boy, throwing himself into his arms. Arnold dropped the suitcase and the package, lifting the boy into the air, spinning him, laughing openly, a kind of joy he rarely showed with our own children. Victoria appeared at the door, smiling. Arnold put Ryan down, walked to her, and kissed her. Not a quick, mechanical kiss like the ones he gave me. A real kiss, deep, full of passion. The kiss of a man in love. Then the three of them entered the house, the door closing behind them. I remained paralyzed, feeling tears stream down my face. It was real. It was really happening. It wasn't just a suspicion, wasn't just a passing affair. It was a whole family, a complete life. While I took care of the house, raised our children, saved every penny for the future, Arnold was building another home, another life, with another woman. I don't know how long I stood there on the sidewalk, crying silently. An elderly lady passing by looked at me with concern, asked if I was okay. I nodded automatically and walked away without a clear direction. I needed to get away from that house, that scene, that reality that was too painful to face. I walked for several blocks, trying to organize my thoughts, my feelings. Eventually, I found a small park and sat on a bench. What time was it? It didn't matter. Nothing seemed to matter at that moment. What to do now? Confront Arnold right there in front of his other family? Return to Mill Creek and pretend I knew nothing? Ask for a divorce? In 1988, in a small, conservative town, a separated woman would face the judgment of everyone. And my children, how would they react to the truth about their father? I ended up returning to Mill Creek that same night. I didn't confront Arnold in Philadelphia. I didn't have the courage, or perhaps it was wisdom. I needed time to think, to plan. I couldn't act impulsively. When I got home, Michael and Claire were worried. My visit to the sick aunt hadn't been very convincing. I made up some explanation about the aunt being better than we thought. More lies. How had it come to this? How had our family, which I always believed was based on honesty and respect, been transformed into this tangle of lies? The following days were a test for my acting abilities. When Arnold returned from his meeting in Philadelphia, I acted normally. I asked about the trip, about the possible promotion. I smiled at the right moments. I agreed when necessary. On the outside, the same Eleanor as always. On the inside, a storm of emotions, anger, pain, disappointment, but also a growing determination. During the weeks that followed, I continued my silent investigation. Now that I knew where to look, I found evidence everywhere. Receipts for gifts I never saw, bank statements showing withdrawals I never understood, notes with a phone number I didn't recognize, and the trips. I now realized they had become more frequent in recent years. Not just once a month, but sometimes 2, 3 times, always with the same excuse. Important meetings, trainings, visits to the regional office, all lies. I began to calculate how much money Arnold had spent on his other family over the years. The house rent, expenses for the boy, gifts, trips, thousands and thousands of dollars, money that could have been used for our own children's future, for our retirement, to improve our life. On a particularly painful afternoon, I found a document that left me breathless. A savings account in the name of Ryan Daniels, with monthly deposits since 1980, 8 years of regular deposits. At the same time, Arnold had been saying we couldn't save much for Michael's college because times are tough, inflation is high. Another lie. With each new discovery, I felt my heart harden a little more. Eleanor, naive, trusting, was slowly dying, giving way to a stronger, more skeptical, more determined woman. One night, while we were having dinner as a family, Michael mentioned his plans for college. He wanted to study engineering at Penn State, but was also considering a private university in case he didn't pass the entrance exam. "Private colleges are very expensive," commented Arnold, frowning. "I don't know if we could afford it." Something broke inside me at that moment. The hypocrisy was too much to bear. My son giving up his dreams due to financial limitations that wouldn't exist if his father wasn't supporting another family. "We'll find a way," I said, surprising everyone with the firmness in my voice. "If necessary, I'll work full-time. Your future is a priority, Michael." Arnold looked at me, surprised. It wasn't common for me to contradict him, especially in front of the children, but I wasn't the same Eleanor anymore. Each lie discovered, each piece of evidence found transformed me a little more. September arrived, bringing the first rains after the dry summer. Arnold announced another business trip. This time I couldn't pretend so well in my acceptance. Something in my expression must have betrayed me, because he looked at me strangely, almost suspiciously. "Is there a problem, Eleanor?" "None," I replied, looking away. "Just tired." He left the next morning, promising to return in 2 days. As soon as he left, I resumed my investigation. There was something I still hadn't found, something important that I felt was missing. It was in the lining of an old suit, stored in the back of the closet, that I found a small yellowed envelope containing a birth certificate. Ryan Daniels, born May 12, 1977. Mother, Victoria Daniels. Father, Arnold Thompson. The world stopped for a moment. The certificate trembled in my hands. Arnold's name was there, in black and white, not as a stepfather, not as a father figure, but as the biological father. I quickly did the calculations. 1977. My God. Ryan had been born just 3 years after our wedding, when Michael was still a baby. When I believed my husband was a faithful man, dedicated to his family, the lie was even bigger, even older than I had imagined. It didn't start with the trips to Philadelphia in the 80s. It started practically together with our marriage. Our whole life together had been built on a lie. I sat on the edge of the bed, the certificate still in my hands, feeling a strange calm take over me. It was as if, finally, all the pieces of the puzzle were in place. The complete image was ugly, painful, but at least it was true. At that moment, I made my decision. I wouldn't continue living a lie. I wouldn't sacrifice my dignity, my self-respect for a marriage that existed only in my imagination. I wouldn't allow my children to grow up believing they should limit their dreams due to financial restrictions that only existed because their father was supporting another family. When Arnold returned from his trip, we would have a conversation that would forever change the course of our lives. I waited for Arnold sitting in the living room armchair, the evidence organized on the coffee table, the receipts, the letters, the photos, and most devastating of all, Ryan's birth certificate. It was almost 10 at night when I heard the sound of a taxi stopping in front of our house. The children were already in their rooms, Michael studying for his college entrance exams, Claire probably reading one of her novels. I had asked them not to wait up for their father, that I needed to talk to him in private. The key turned in the lock, and Arnold entered, carrying his small travel suitcase. He looked tired but satisfied, as he always did when he returned from these business trips. Now I knew why. "Good evening, Eleanor," he said, putting the suitcase on the floor. "Are the kids already asleep?" "In their rooms," I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. "We need to talk, Arnold." He looked at me, noticing something different in my tone, in my posture. His eyes fell on the papers on the coffee table. "What's that?" he asked, his voice suddenly tense. "The truth," I replied simply. "Please, sit down." Arnold stood for a moment, as if considering fleeing. Finally, he sat on the sofa, across from me, separated only by the coffee table and by 20 years of lies. "I know about Victoria," I began, keeping my voice low so the children wouldn't hear. "I know about Ryan. I know about the house on Oak Street in Philadelphia. I know everything, Arnold." His face paled. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "I don't want to hear more lies. I have proof of everything. I saw it with my own eyes." "You were there?" he asked, incredulous. "I was. I saw you arrive. I saw Ryan running into your arms, calling you Dad. And I saw Victoria greet you with a kiss. I saw everything, Arnold." He lowered his head, running his hands over his face in a gesture of defeat. There was no way to deny it anymore. The farce had come to an end. "For how long?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. I wanted to hear it from his mouth. "Since the beginning," he confessed, his voice almost a whisper. "I knew Victoria before I met you. We were dating when I was transferred to Mill Creek. This part I didn't know. The betrayal was even older, deeper than I had imagined. I broke up with her when I moved," he continued. "Or at least I tried, but she contacted me a few months later, saying she was pregnant. And you decided to marry me anyway," I completed, feeling a new wave of pain. He hadn't just betrayed me during the marriage. He had entered into it already deceiving me. "My family would never accept that I had a child out of wedlock," he explained, as if that justified everything. "And Victoria, she understood the situation. She said she would raise the baby alone, that she wouldn't interfere with my life. I would send money, visit when possible. And your plan was to continue like this forever? 2 families, 2 lives?" Arnold didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. "When did the night calls start?" I asked, trying to complete the puzzle. "Since we installed the telephone," he admitted. "It was the only way to maintain regular contact without raising suspicions. I would wait for you to fall asleep and call her. 20 years believing my husband got up to pray. 20 years admiring his devotion, his faith. What a fool I had been. And all the meetings, the trainings, the visits to the regional office, they were to see them?" "Yes," confessed Arnold, now speaking more quickly, as if wanting to purge everything at once. "At first it was just to see Ryan, to fulfill my obligation as a father. But Victoria and we never really ended things. The feeling was still there. And what about me and your children here? What were we, Arnold? An obligation? A disguise for your real life?" He raised his eyes, finally looking at me. "It's not like that, Eleanor. I care about you, about Michael and Claire. You are my family, too." "Two," I repeated bitterly, as if he could have 2 families, 2 lives, 2 wives. "Many men do this," he tried in a last effort to normalize his betrayal. I'm not interested in what many men do, I cut him off, my voice now firmer. I'm interested in what my husband did, the man I trusted for 20 years, the man I admired, respected, defended among my friends as an example of character. We sat in silence for a moment. The clock on the wall marked the seconds, each tick a reminder of the time lost, wasted in a lie. What do you want to do now? Arnold finally asked, his voice betraying his fear. It was the question I had been asking myself for days. What to do? Continue pretending, as so many wives did at that time? Confront him, but remain in the marriage for the children, for financial stability, for fear of social judgment, or put an end to it, start over, even with all the challenges that would imply. I want a divorce, Arnold. The words came out more easily than I expected. They sounded strange in the air, as if they belonged to another person, not to the obedient and traditional Eleanor I had been for so long. Divorce? He repeated, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Eleanor, you can't be serious. Think of the children, your reputation, what people will say. I've thought about all that, I replied calmly. And I've also thought about my dignity, my self-respect, the example I want to set for Michael and Claire. I can't continue living a lie, Arnold, not after knowing everything I know. We can work this out, he insisted, now in an almost desperate tone. I can end things with Victoria, I can stop the trips. I can be a better husband. And Ryan, your son? Will you abandon him? No, of course not, but I can reduce the visits, just send money. How can you suggest that? Abandon your own son? What kind of man would do that? I'm trying to save our marriage, Eleanor. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to have two families, Arnold. Maybe even before, when you decided to marry me knowing another woman was expecting your child. He stood up, began pacing the room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of desperation. It can't end like this. 20 years together, 2 children. 20 years of lies, I corrected him. As for the children, they deserve to know the truth. Not today, not now, but eventually. They deserve to know what kind of man their father really is. You wouldn't do that, he challenged. You'd destroy the image they have of me. You did that yourself, Arnold. That night, Arnold slept on the couch. I, for the first time in weeks, slept deeply in our bed. It was as if an immense weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The truth was finally exposed, the decision made. The road ahead would be difficult, but at least it would be honest. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Arnold tried everything to convince me to reconsider. Promises, tears, even veiled threats about my financial situation if I went ahead. Nothing worked. My determination only grew. I spoke to Michael and Claire separately, without going into all the details, just explaining that their father and I were separating, that some differences could no longer be reconciled. Michael, always perceptive, seemed to understand there was more behind my vague explanation. Claire cried, asked if it was her fault, if it was something she had done. It broke my heart to have to comfort her, to assure her that the problem was between her father and me, nothing related to her. The next step was to find a lawyer. In 1988, divorce was already legal in the United States, but it was still a complicated process, especially in a small conservative town like Mill Creek. The only lawyer in town refused to take my case, claiming to be a friend of Arnold's family. I had to go to the neighboring town, which was larger, to find someone willing to represent me. Mr. Macedo, an elderly gentleman with a sharp look, listened to my story without judgment. When I finished, he nodded gravely. Do you have proof of the infidelities? The 2 families? I do, I replied, showing him the folder where I had organized all the evidence, photos, letters, receipts, even the birth certificate of his other son. Good, very good, he murmured, examining the documents. With this evidence, we'll get a fair division of assets. Your husband can't claim he can't support you and the children, not when it's proven he's been supporting another family for years. Meanwhile, the news of our separation began to spread around town. As expected, the comments, the looks, the whispers followed me wherever I went, at the farmer's market, at the grocery store, even at church. The same people who had previously envied me for having such a good, respectable husband now looked at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "I heard Arnold and Eleanor are separating," I heard one woman comment to another in the bank line. "They say he has another woman." "A woman her age should be grateful to still have a husband," replied the other, without bothering to lower her voice. "Close her eyes and move on." These reactions hurt me, of course, but they didn't surprise me. It was the mentality of the time, especially in a small town. A woman was supposed to endure everything to maintain the marriage, to not be alone, to not face the stigma of being divorced. Arnold, of course, used this mentality to his advantage. He began spreading among friends, colleagues at work, even some family members, that I was overreacting, that all wives had to deal with small infidelities, that I was destroying our family out of pride. Some believed him. My own mother, traditional as she was, begged me to reconsider. "Daughter, a man is a man," she said, as if that explained everything. "Your father also had his adventures, but he never let anything be lacking at home. That's how things are." "Not for me, Mom," I responded firmly. "I don't accept living a lie, and it's not just an adventure. He has another son, another family." For years. The divorce process followed its course, slow but steady. Arnold hired a lawyer from the city, trying to intimidate Mr. Macedo with legal jargon and procedural maneuvers. It didn't work. The evidence was too clear, indisputable. In December 1988, a few months after my discovery, the judge in the neighboring county decreed our legal separation. The final divorce would come a year later, as the law required at that time. Arnold was ordered to leave the house, which had been purchased with help from my father when we got married, and to pay child support for Michael and Claire. It wasn't much, but it was enough to supplement my salary at the school. That night, after the separation hearing, I returned to the house, now just mine and my children's, and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief, from liberation. It was as if I was breathing fully for the first time in years. The months that followed were ones of adaptation. Learning to live as a separated woman, raising 2 teenagers alone, managing the house with more limited resources. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I cried from worry, from fear of the future, but never, not for a moment, did I regret my decision. Michael, my oldest son, was my greatest support. At 19, he was almost a man. He arranged a part-time job to help with expenses, without abandoning his studies for the entrance exams. Claire, at 16, had more difficulty accepting the new reality. She missed her father, questioned why he couldn't come back home. It was on one of these nights, seeing my daughter cry from missing her father, that I almost weakened, almost went back, almost accepted Arnold back, almost closed my eyes and moved on, as so many people suggested. Almost. But then I remembered the photos, the letters, Ryan's birth certificate. I remembered the house on Oak Street, Victoria greeting Arnold with a kiss, the boy calling him Dad. I remembered the lies, the nights when I believed my husband got up to pray when, in reality, he was talking to another woman. And I knew I had made the right decision, no matter how difficult the road ahead. The spring of 1989 arrived, bringing new beginnings. Michael was accepted into the engineering program at Penn State, without needing a private college after all. Claire eventually accepted the reality, especially after Arnold began visiting her regularly, taking her for walks, to the movies. As for me, I had gotten a raise at the school, taking on more responsibilities in the office. Life went on, different from what I had planned, but still my life. A life based on truth, not lies. A life where I could look in the mirror every morning without shame, without doubts. That same year, I heard from an acquaintance that Arnold had moved permanently to Philadelphia, that he now lived with Victoria and Ryan, that he seemed happy. Strangely, the news didn't hurt me. I felt only a kind of relief. Let them be happy, let them live their truth, as I was living mine. On a Sunday afternoon, sitting on the porch of my house, really mine now, watching Claire study and Michael fix the garden fence, I realized something important. I too was happy. Not in the way I had imagined, not in the marriage I thought I had, but still happy, free, at peace with myself. The road had been long since that cold July night when I put on my hearing aid and heard the truth behind my husband's nighttime whispers. A difficult road, painful in many moments, but one that led me exactly where I needed to be. And for the first time in a long time, I no longer feared the future. I was ready for whatever came next. The years following my separation were like learning to walk again, each step uncertain at first, stumbling sometimes, but gradually gaining confidence, firmness, until finally finding my own rhythm. The beginning of the 1990s brought many changes to America and also to my life. While the country faced a recession, the Gulf War, and a changing political landscape, I faced my own challenges, being a divorced woman in a small town where everyone knew each other and judged. I remember the Sunday services, sitting alone in the church pew where our family once sat with such pride, the looks, the barely disguised whispers. There goes Eleanor, the one who left Arnold. At first, it cut me like a knife. With time, I learned to hold my head high, look forward, focus on the pastor's words, and ignore everything else. My work at the school became my refuge. In 1990, the principal offered me a promotion. From secretary, I became the administrative assistant with a small salary increase. It wasn't much, but it helped compensate for the months when Arnold's child support was late, which happened frequently at first, perhaps in an attempt to make me reconsider my decision. Michael started engineering college that same year. My oldest son, always so responsible, divided himself between his studies and a part-time job to help with household expenses. On weekends, he still found time to fix things around the house, a leaking faucet, a malfunctioning switch, tasks that had once been Arnold's. "You don't have to do all this, son," I would say, seeing him tired after an intense week of classes and work. "I want to do it, Mom," he would reply with that determined smile he had inherited from me, not his father. "This house is our responsibility now." Claire, at 17, had more difficulty adapting to the new reality. She missed her father, questioned my decision, sometimes with tears, other times with teenage anger. Arnold visited her regularly, took her for walks, bought her presents, things he rarely did when we lived together. It was as if, free from the obligation of pretending to be a dedicated husband, he could finally make an effort to be a present father, at least for Claire. "Why can't we be a family again?" she would sometimes ask after returning from one of these outings with her father. "He seems sorry, Mom." "Some things once broken can't be fixed, dear," I would reply, hugging her, feeling her fragile body tremble with held-back sobs. "But that doesn't mean we can't build something new, something different, but still good." With time, Claire began to understand, especially after one of her visits to Philadelphia, which Arnold finally began to allow when she turned 18, she met Victoria and Ryan. She returned from that visit quieter, thoughtful. "You won't believe it, Mom," she said that night, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Ryan is the spitting image of Dad. The same eyes, the same way of smiling. It's strange, like having a half-brother I never knew existed." "And how do you feel about that?" I asked, stroking her hair so similar to mine. "Confused, sad, but also, I don't know, curious. He seems nice. He's my age, did you know? We're in the same grade at school. It's like we grew up in parallel worlds." Claire's perception was surprisingly mature for her 18 years. Parallel worlds, that was exactly what Arnold had created. Two families, two lives growing side by side, separated only by a 120-mile road between Mill Creek and Philadelphia. In 1992, Claire followed in her brother's footsteps and went to college, fulfilling her dream of studying education. With the children at university, the house suddenly became quiet, empty. It was a period of adjustment for me. For 25 years, my life had revolved around other people, first Arnold, then the children. Now, at 46, I found myself alone for the first time, with time and space to think about myself, about who I was beyond being a wife and mother. It was during this period that I made another important decision. I went back to school. I enrolled in night classes to complete the high school diploma I had abandoned when I got married. The first classes were intimidating. I sat in the back row, embarrassed, surrounded by much younger students. But I soon discovered I wasn't the only middle-aged woman seeking to resume her education. We formed a small group, me and 3 other ladies, all with similar stories. Early marriages, interrupted education, lives dedicated to family. "It's never too late to start over," said Mrs. Jenkins, the oldest of us at 62, with an enviable determination. "My late husband used to say women didn't need an education. Now he's under the ground, and I'm here learning equations." We laughed together, these women and I, united by shared experiences, by similar challenges. It was with them that I began to rediscover the pleasure of female friendship, of solidarity, of mutual support. Before, my social circle had been limited to other wives, superficial meetings where we talked only about children, recipes, small gossip. Now we talked about books, about politics, about our delayed dreams and renewed hopes. In 1994, at 48, I received my high school diploma. Michael and Claire came to the graduation, proud, applauding when I was called to the stage. It was one of the most emotional moments of my life, not for the diploma itself, but for what it represented. A fresh start, a promise to myself that my story was still being written. That same year, inspired by my return to studies and my work at the school, I decided to apply to a teaching program at the college in the neighboring town. It was a dream I didn't even know I had until I began to consider the possibilities that life still held for me. "Are you sure, Mom?" Michael asked, concerned. "College requires a lot of time, a lot of money." "I am, son. I'll study at night, continue working during the day. I've already calculated, with my current salary and by saving in other areas, I can afford the tuition." "Then we'll make it work," he said, hugging me tightly. "I'm proud of you." I passed the entrance exam in early 1995, not with a brilliant score, but enough to secure my place. At 49, I entered a college classroom for the first time, carrying new notebooks and renewed determination. The 4 years of college were intense, challenging, transformative. I studied in the morning before work, during lunch, at night after classes, on weekends. My eyes hurt from so much reading, my hands from so much writing, but it was a good pain, a pain of growth. During this period, Michael graduated in engineering and got a good job in Boston. Claire was in her 3rd year of education studies, already interning at an elementary school. My children had found their paths, were building their own lives, and I, contrary to all expectations, including my own, was doing the same. In 1996, I received news that reopened old wounds. Arnold had officially married Victoria. Our divorce had been finalized years ago, of course. But knowing that he had formalized that relationship that for so long had been kept in the shadows caused me a strange mixture of emotions. Not jealousy, not anymore. Perhaps a hint of melancholy for what could have been, for the lost time, but also a certain satisfaction in knowing that now everything was out in the open, as it should have been from the beginning. Claire went to the wedding, representing our family. She came back with photos, stories, even a piece of cake wrapped in a napkin. "It was strange, Mom," she said that night, sitting on the edge of my bed, "seeing Dad marry someone else, but at the same time it seemed right somehow. They seem happy together." "I'm happy for them," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of that statement. And it was true. Time had softened my anger, my hurt, not to the point of forgetting or completely forgiving. Some betrayals are too big for that, but enough to wish well to this man who, for so many years, had been part of my life. In 1999, at 53, I received my teaching degree. Michael came from Boston, especially for my graduation. Claire, already graduated and working as a teacher, cried throughout the entire ceremony. My friends from the night classes, some who had also gone on to college, were there too. It was a celebration not just of my academic achievement, but of my personal journey, of the woman I had become. The new millennium brought more changes. With my diploma in hand, I was promoted at the school where I had worked for so many years. From administrative assistant, I became educational coordinator. The salary improved significantly, allowing me to make small renovations to the house, replace worn-out furniture, even buy my first car, a used Honda, but which for me represented a freedom I had never experienced. The 2000s saw my children build their own families. Michael married Denise, a fellow engineer, in 2002. Claire found Edward, a history teacher, and they married in 2004. I became a grandmother for the first time in 2005, when Denise gave birth to Matthew. The following year, Claire presented me with Emily. Seeing my grandchildren grow up was and continues to be one of the greatest joys of my life. With them, I experienced a different kind of love, a love without the complications, the expectations, the disappointments that sometimes mark other relationships. A pure, simple, unconditional love. Curiously, it was through my grandchildren that Arnold and I found a way to coexist peacefully. At birthday parties, school presentations, family lunches, we would meet, exchange a few courteous words, even share a smile watching Matthew or Emily do something funny or surprising. "They look just like you when you were that age," Arnold commented during Emily's 5th birthday in 2011. He was older, hair completely white, some deep wrinkles marking his face, but his eyes were still the same ones that had enchanted me so many years ago. "You think so?" "I see a lot of Claire in her," I replied, watching our granddaughter blow out the candles, surrounded by little friends. "Claire took after you," he said with a melancholy smile. "The determination, the strength, things I always admired in you, Eleanor." It was a strange moment, but not uncomfortable. Two people who had shared so much, love, pain, children, memories, now separated by choices, by circumstances, but still connected by bonds that neither betrayal nor time could completely break. In 2012, I officially retired. After almost 3 decades at the same school, it was time to pass the torch. They organized a surprise party for me with former and current students, colleagues, friends. It was moving to see how many lives I had touched over the years, how many people made a point of saying I had made a difference to them. Retirement opened a new chapter in my life. Free time, for the first time in many years. I decided to use it to fulfill another delayed dream: travel. Nothing too extravagant. My pension and savings didn't allow for luxuries, but small trips around the country. Sometimes alone, sometimes with my friends from the night class days, who were also retired. I saw the ocean for the first time at age 67. I stood at the edge of the beach, feeling the salt water touch my feet, looking at that blue immensity, and cried. Not from sadness, but from awe, from gratitude for a life that, despite all the difficulties, had brought me there to see something so beautiful, so grand. In 2015, I received news that shook me. Arnold had been diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer. It was Claire who told me, her eyes full of tears. Despite everything that had happened between us, I felt genuine sadness. This man, with all his errors, his lies, had been an important part of my story. He was the father of my children, the grandfather of my grandchildren. In the months that followed, I distantly followed his fight against the disease. Through Claire's updates, I learned that Victoria was tirelessly by his side, as was Ryan, now an adult man who had followed in his father's footsteps and worked at the same bank. Arnold passed away on a September morning in 2016. The funeral was in Philadelphia, where he had built his second life, which ended up being his last. I traveled with Claire for the ceremony. Michael was already there, having come directly from Boston. It was a strange moment to find myself at the funeral of the man who had been my husband for so many years, alongside the woman who had been his mistress and then his wife. Victoria and I greeted each other cordially, two now elderly women united by the loss of the same man, albeit in different ways. Ryan, whom I had never met in person until then, came to me after the ceremony. Claire was right. He was impressively similar to Arnold when young. The same eyes, the same smile. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, extending his hand, "my father talked about you. He said you were the strongest woman he ever knew." These words surprised me. I never imagined that Arnold would talk about me to his other family, much less express admiration. I was speechless for a moment, just shaking the hand of this man who, in other circumstances, could have been one more son to me. "He made a lot of mistakes," continued Ryan with a sincerity that touched me. "He was never perfect, but in recent years he talked a lot about regrets, about paths not taken. He wanted you to know that. I thanked him for sharing this with me. It didn't change the past, didn't erase the pain, but somehow brought a certain closure, a feeling that the cycle was complete. Today, at 73, I look back and see a life that didn't go as planned, but that still was and continues to be an extraordinary journey. A journey of losses, yes, but also of gains, of disappointments, but also of discoveries, of endings, but also of new beginnings. That cold July night in 1988, when I put on my hearing aid and heard the truth behind my husband's nighttime whispers, could have been just the end of a story. But I chose to transform it into the beginning of another, my own story, written with my own words, my own choices. And if there's one lesson I've learned, which I'd like to share with you, my dears, it's this. It's never too late to start over, to rediscover who you are, to build a life that's truly yours. The truth can hurt, can break your heart, can turn your world upside down, but the truth also sets you free. And in freedom, we find our strength, our purpose, our peace. So don't be afraid of the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Don't be afraid to start over, no matter your age. Life is more generous than we imagine, always offering new opportunities, new paths, new forms of happiness, if we have the courage to seek them. And before I say goodbye, I wanted to ask once more for you who are watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. This helps me a lot to continue sharing my stories with you. Thank you very much for listening to me today.